The whisper behind the door. In a small rural village nestled in the foothills near Morocco, there lived a young man named Yassine. Yassine had recently moved into his late grandfather's old house, a solitary dwelling that stood at the edge of a forest. The locals called it Gabe el Mazdoum, which translates to the cursed forest. Despite the ominous name, Yassine saw the house as a blessing. It meant he could own some land, live in peace and start over. The first few nights passed without incident, but on the seventh night, everything changed. Just after midnight, Yassine was awoken by a faint sound, a gentle yet persistent tapping. Tap, tap, tap. He opened his eyes and ears, trying to pinpoint the noise. At first he thought it was the wind against the window pane, but no. The sound was coming from the wooden door leading to the attic. At first it was barely noticeable, like someone tapping their fingernail on the wood. But then it grew louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. Yassine lay in bed, listening intently. It seemed to be coming from the other side of the door, each tap sending a shiver down his spine. He tried to convince himself it was nothing but his imagination playing tricks on him. Maybe the wind, he thought, or perhaps some nocturnal animal seeking shelter from the cold night. But as the hours passed and the tapping continued relentlessly, he knew it couldn't be anything natural. It was then that Yassine remembered what the villagers had told him about his grandfather's house. They spoke of strange occurrences, unexplainable events that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. They warned him of the house's dark history, but he had dismissed their stories as superstitious nonsense. Now, though, as he lay there listening to the incessant tapping, he wasn't so sure. Determined to stop the eerie sound, he got out of bed and walked towards the attic door. He considered knocking, but what if whatever was on the other side didn't want to be disturbed? What if it was better left undisturbed? Hesitantly, he placed his hand on the doorknob and turned it, but it was locked. Yassine frowned. He didn't remember his grandfather having a lock on that door. He tried again, this time shaking the door. Still nothing. It was as if whatever was in the attic didn't want to be found. Yassine returned to bed, his heart pounding in his chest. Sleep. He tossed and turned restlessly, the rhythmic tapping now replaced by an unsettling whisper. It was coming from behind the door, words in a language he couldn't understand. Sometimes it sounded like laughter, other times like weeping. Or maybe it was just me, he thought, exhaustion pulling at his eyelids. But no, the whispers continued, growing louder, more insistent, making it impossible to ignore. Finally, unable to take it anymore, he got out of bed and walked towards the attic door. The whispers seemed to grow louder as he approached. He reached out, touched the door, and listened intently. This time, he could make out the words, though he didn't know what they meant. He could feel the presence on the other side, whatever it was, and it seemed angry. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open, but there was nothing. The room was empty. Darkness pressed against him, heavy and suffocating, and as he turned to leave, he saw it, a black shadow in the corner. It stood tall and thin, like a wisp of smoke given form. There was no face, only a mouth that stretched unnaturally wide. A scream caught in Yassine's throat. He stumbled back, knocking over a chair in his haste to get away. He ran from the house that night, barefoot and terrified, not stopping until he reached the safety of his neighbor's house. The next day he returned with a local imam. As soon as the imam stepped inside, he began reciting verses from the Quran. The air crackled with energy and the hairs on Yassine's arms stood on end. Suddenly, the attic door flew open and a scream echoed from above. Then the other doors in the house started slamming shut one by one. The imam had found the source of the disturbance. Using his knowledge of Islamic rituals, he was able to trap the entity in the attic. It was an evil spirit, a jinn, and it had been living in the house for years, growing in power and influence. According to the imam, his grandfather had once buried something forbidden in the attic, an old charm wrapped in cloth, soaked in blood. It was an object of black magic, and it had drawn the attention of the jinn. The jinn had taken up residence in the house, preying on the fear and despair of its inhabitants. The imam destroyed the charm and continued the ruqyah for 3 days. By the time he was finished, the house was silent, but Yasmin never stayed another night. To this day, he says he can still hear the whisper behind the door, calling out to him in the darkness, reminding him of the evil that lies just beyond our understanding.